In this project, this is about super light sensitive intruder alarm circuit using IR and 555 timer. Intruder sensors are widely used in both high security areas and residential homes to identify and alert residents to the presence of intruders. Theft and burglary are one of the most common crimes all around the world. Thus, in applying the concept of sensors and amplifiers, we can make use of these devices in combating against the threat of unwanted intrusion. There are several types of intruder detection alarms. First, some use a laser to detect movement, which utilizes a sensor that can identify if the continuous flow of laser is broken at any point, triggering the alarm. While others use pressure variants that rely on pressure sensor to detect the alteration in the values being applied in a certain area of alarm. This system, an intruder alarm, is powered by lithium ion battery. Its resistance fluctuates in reaction to the strength of the light falling on it. Thus, it is also known as a photoresistor. Its resistance lowers as the amount of light increases. IR transmitter always emits the IR infrared rays, which have to be received by the IR receiver. When an obstruction comes between the IR sensor and the IR receiver, the transmitted IR rays are reflected back to the IR receiver. When the reflected IR photons are received by the IR receiver, the OP amp output is high. This operation amplifier output is linked to the 345 timers reset pin. Intruder alarms are common devices used in high security facilities as well as civilian homes to detect and alert intruders. Super light sensitive intruder alarm circuit using 345 timer is designed to alert the user if an intruder enters the house. If there is an obstacle in front of the IR sensor, it generates an interrupt signal. This interrupt signal is given to the speaker to alert the user. The advantage of this system is that it is simple to install, the ability to be utilized both indoors and outdoors. It may be utilized as a home security system as well as in museums, banks, and offices to safeguard numerous precious items. The advantage of this system is that it can be activated when a living thing and a large bird is sitting on the wall. They are more expensive when compared to simple security system.
Super light sensitive intruder alarm circuit using 555 timer is designed to alert the user if an intruder enters the house. So for this flowchart, it shows on how the system works. If there is an obstacle in front of the IR sensor and the op amp and 555 RST pin is high, then it will generate an interrupt signal. This interrupt signal is given to the speaker to alert the user. And if the IR receiver does not receive an IR raise and the op amp and 555 RST pin is low, then it will not generate an interrupt signal.
Good day, everyone. I'm John Mir Carlet, and I'm going to present the final term paper of for our subject fundamentals of mixed signals and sensors. Our project is super light sensitive intruder alarm circuit using IR and 555 timer. I'm going to discuss the circuitry behind the project and the components. So I'm going to present the actual circuit diagram which we have gathered from the internet. So this is from electronichubs.com, and this would be our implemented project as well. As you can see, the implemented project is a complex circuit which includes and highlights the 555 timer and the use of IR sensors. So IR sensors is in IR sensors using IR transmitter and IR receiver. So it emits IR rays which have to be received by the IR receiver, and whenever there's an obstacle in front of the IR sensor, the transmitted IR rays are reflected back to the IR receiver, and then it would send a signal that the receiving end of the IR is not receiving anything. So the output of op amp is high when the IR receiver receives the reflected IR rays. And then the op amp would be low when it doesn't receive any IR rays. So this output of operational amplifier is connected to the reset pin of the 555 timer. So what is a type 55 timer? So a 555 timer acts as a free running oscillator. So it will generate the frequency when high pulse is applied at the reset pin. And then the generated frequency of the 555 timer varied by resisting by the resistor values R4, as you can see here, and R5, or by the varying capacitor value C3. So as you can see, the output of the 555 timer is now low whenever the signal has been cut or there's an obstacle in front of it. Now, when the input voltage applied at the pin 4 of the 555 timer is low, the output will also be low. And when the input voltage of the pin 4 is now high, the 555 timer will produce a frequency which can then be adjusted by the different value combinations of resistors R1, R2, and C3, capacitor C3. So the diagram explained earlier by Miss Floran, whenever there's an obstacle, the IR receiver receives an IR raise and the output of pump is high and the pin is high. So the speaker will now produce the sound through the R1, R2, and capacitor C3. Whenever there's no obstacle or whenever there's a zero state of the system or the circuit, the receiver will not receive any raise and the output is low, the pin is low, and therefore there will be no sound. So the output of the NE555 is filtered by here, as you can see in the 1UF capacitor, and then fed to the speaker. So the C1 right here would be the capacitor that will going to be filtering the output of the NEE555 timer. So here are the parts. So the NEE555 timer itself, the op amp, the pot which is 10K and 4.7K, the IR transmitter which is very and the IR receiver which is very critical in the system, the red LED which as you can see here would be our indicator if the system is on, and then the ceramic capacitors which is 0.1 UF and 0.01 UF which will be filtering the other um, electricity that's passing to. Now the electrolytic capacitor which is 1 UF or the 16 volts will be our filtering tool. And then the resistors which is 10K, 100 which is the R4 and R5 respectively. And then another resistors of 330 ohms for the speaker. And lastly, the two important components which is the speaker which would alarm the user and then the battery. Now going back to our op amp. The op amp that we're going to be using is the LM358 IC, which consists of two operational amplifiers. Now, each op amp has two inputs, the inverting and the non-inverting, and one output. The op-amp output is high when non-inverting voltage is greater than the inverting voltage, and it is low when the inverting voltage is greater than non-inverting voltage. Now, the operating voltage of the transmitter is around 2 to 3 volts. So to drop the remaining voltage, we need to connect a resistor in series with the LED. Now to receive the IR, it is always used in reverse bias or to the reverse of the polarity of the transmitted signal. It almost acts as a closed circuit when it receives the IR rays and it has a high resistance, thus we needing the resistor earlier, and when it does not receive any IR rays. So this alarm can be applied to home, offices, and the circuit limitations of this is if there is any non-living thing in front of the IR sensor, albeit an object that is not alive, for example, a car passing by or a bottle of coke or whatever a solid object is in front of the IR sensor that breaks the flow of the light, it would trigger the alarm. So that's it for our super sensitive intruder alarm circuit, and I hope you understand our circuit. Thank you very much.
you will now get any sound. And the last one is disconnect the battery from the circuit. Next slide.
Possible applications. The system is designed for security purposes by detecting intruders passing by the sensors. It can be used in any establishment such as small offices, business establishments, private residences, factories, and warehouses. Next slide. Limitations of the system. Although this system can be deployed as a deterrent for intruders, this also contains certain flaws and limitations that it can and can't achieve. First is that because it only relies on the data of the light sensor being disrupted by an object in front of it, this can also detect a wide range of objects that can block light from passing through and can produce false assumptions that it detected an intruder. Even non-living objects can be detected, thus making this system sensitive and less reliable. However, this drawback still comes with a caveat since it is better rather than not detecting at all. This can bring alertness and security for any certain establishment.